Hello, everybody. Welcome or welcome back, depending on whether you've been here before or not. So, today I am doing something a little bit different from what I usually do here on this channel. I know I have done a few tier list stuff before, but I've never done one on Diary of a Wimpy Kid books, which I am going to be grading the first 17 books in the series. I see book 18 is right down there, but I'll talk about that in just a sec. And what I'm going to be doing is going over a brief synopsis of the plot of each of the books and sort of give my opinion on all of them and then mark them up on the tier list here. So before I actually start, the first thing that you might notice is I already put a few books up on the board. So the first tier is this NA tier. I think I might have actually read the Awesome Friendly Adventure book, but whatever the case, these are books I just do not remember enough from to actually grade, so I'm not going to be talking about those ones. And then this isolated tier right here, what this is I did read these books. I don't remember a whole lot from Diary of an Awesome Friendly Kid, but whatever the case, they're not part of the main series the same way the other ones are, so I'm not going to be grading them. Also, since I am going to be talking about the plot line of each of the different books, there will be spoilers. You have been warned. So before we do start, however, one last thing to go over. Book 18 that just came out as of me recording this, No Brainer. I have not gotten around to reading this one yet, so for right now, that'll go in the NA tier also, because I haven't gotten to thumb my way through it yet. I'll probably get around to it at some point. Maybe I could do a video in the future where I sort of talk about where I maybe grade that one too, or talk about how good or bad I think this one is. But for right now, it is going in the NA tier. So with all that out of the way, let's get started into the real meat and potatoes. So the first book, I'm going to be doing these in chronological order. And the first book is Diary of a Wimpy Kid, no title added. And I'm going to give that one a solid B tier. So it was a pretty good book. And it was mostly about, I guess, Greg. Greg is starting middle school, his first year there. And he's sort of, I guess, adjusting to everything, adjusting to all the adjustments you need to make when going from elementary to middle school. It's, middle school tends to be this whole transitory period of people's lives, and how he, I guess, navigates through all his social and academic situations that he finds himself in. He also finds his friend. He also there's also discussion about his friendship with Rowley, who's another major character throughout the series, and also it discusses some portions of his home life with his parents and his two brothers. And it was a pretty good book, like I was saying. There's also some various things involving certain other more minor characters. But overall, it wasn't too spectacular when you compare it alongside to these. It just feels very basic, especially when you actually start reading through the other ones that go. I feel like just about every other book after this one has a more sort of coherent storyline to follow. This one is just kind of a mosh pit of a few things, and so. So, for a starter book, it was good, but there are some others that are better, and you'll see which ones I think of those are. That brings us to the next book, which is Roderick Rules. I think this one, I think overall this book was slightly weaker than the original. It was still pretty good. The main, I guess, storyline of this one is Greg and his older brother Roderick. They have this whole sibling rivalry / sibling bond storyline going on. They have a series of adventures together. They do certain things, and and they sort of navigate through their life, or their lives, I guess, with various things. The main problem to me with this one is it felt like a lot of it. Well, two things actually. One, a lot of it just felt like a cliche, sibling rivalry. It's not exactly something super unheard of. And second thing is a lot of the plot lines felt really drawn out, I would say. Like it just felt like they were always circling around these same topics that were very boring. Like, for instance, there was that whole Mom Bucks program that was going on for a while. I didn't find that very interesting, but it was still a decent book overall. Or actually, not even decent, good. But I know a lot of other people that think this one was like the best one. It seems to be a fan favorite among many. But for me, it doesn't quite reach that level. Now, that can be argued though with the next book in the series, The Last Straw, which excuse me. Which the main plot line of that one is Greg's dad sees Greg as, well, a wimpy kid, and he's trying to like man him up, quote unquote. So he does all sorts of things to try to, I guess he puts Greg through all these things that he thinks will toughen him up. Like he tries to get him into weightlifting. He makes him play soccer for a little while, and then eventually he tries sending him off to this Spag Union camp, which in the end they changed their minds about. But it was pretty good. I think the thing that, for me at least, really puts this one above the other two is the funny moments in this one were way funnier. Like, I felt like it did a really good job with that. There's also a side story where Greg has a kind of a serious crush on this one girl for a while, and he's like really interested in chasing after her. There's a little bit of that in the other two books, but it wasn't like a big plot line, whereas with this one, they actually did some things. And yeah. Overall, I would say a good entry. But this brings me to the next book, Dog Days. I thought this one was a little bit better than the other two, but still not on par with The Last Straw. This one, the plot wasn't as centralized as the last two. It was a bit more. It wasn't as all over the place as the first book, but it was to an extent. So this one was mostly about Greg's summer experience, I guess right after The Last Straw ended. And I would say the closest thing to a sort of central theme in this one is Greg's mom is like trying to sort of get him to do things besides watch TV and play video games all the time, because that's like, those are the two things he loves to do the most, it seems. And and so his mom sort of does a number of things, like they start this reading club, and a bunch of other moms drag their sons to go join that club. That part was pretty funny. And then there was this period of time where Greg and Rowley quit talking to each other for like almost a month, or actually, I think a little bit more than a month. Actually, I'd have to double check, but it was for a while in the book. I know that. And there's all sorts of things that happen. This one also had some pretty funny moments, like when Greg's dad got that dog Sweetie, and it drove Greg crazy for a chunk of the time. I thought that was pretty funny. And And yeah, overall, overall, I just thought this one wasn't great, but it was good, and that's all I can really say. The next one is The Ugly Truth, which actually was the sort of brand new book when I first started reading the series. So that this is sort of these first five are sort of the, I guess, first impression of the series I got off of them. I would say, I'm gonna say this one is in between the original and Roderick Rules. It wasn't. It just felt very boring at times, but also it did have some interesting, I guess, plot points. So the sort of central theme around this one, or the closest thing to it, because even the ones where there is sort of like a main plot line to follow, they do sidetrack a lot of the times. At least in the earlier books, you'll see later on that isn't so much the case anymore. But The Ugly Truth is Greg sort of goes through this quote unquote coming of age period of his life. This is his third year of middle school, if you're following. So I'm assuming that would mean 8th grade, at least if you follow the whole chronology timeline, which this that's not what this video is for. So go watch another one if that's what you want to see. But Greg goes through this sort of awkward period. Him and Rowley sort of stop getting along at the very end of Dog Days again. That also happens in the first book for a little while, and so they part ways, and it's sort of like this strange period of Greg's life where he's like not really sure where he belongs anymore, and and you know, there's also this other sort of I don't even want to say side plot, because it's I feel like that part's kind of important too, where his family has this wedding. He has an uncle who's getting married for the 4th time, I believe it said, and so he's sort of trying to figure out like which family member he wants to be like. He has to have this talk session with the eldest relative in his family. That's like this family sort of family tradition that they have going, which weirds him out. But the one part that I really liked about this one, which didn't really have to do with the main plot, is where he talks about how he, at a party at his neighbor's house, he snuck deviled eggs into this plastic plant, and then they can't take the smell, but they can't figure out where it's coming from, so they just move out of the house. I thought that part was hilarious. That was my favorite part in that book for sure. But overall, a lot of it just felt boring to read. So that one is a B tier, slightly below the original. I thought it was still slightly better than Roderick Rules, but these three are all very, very close to the same, I would say. And that is my 2 cents on that book. The next book in the series is Cabin Fever. And this one kind of had a weird, like, it had a plot to follow, but only in the last third of the book. For the first while, the one thing about this book is it was sort of like centered around coming up to Christmas for the first for the entire time. Like the first thing they talk about is decorating their Christmas tree, and so But then for like the first while, they're just like talking about different things. Like Greg talks about these problems that his school is having and how the school is like sort of does things to try and fix it. And then at one point, where the plot, I would say, really kicks in is midway through the book when him and his friend Rowley are trying to advertise stuff, but they put stuff on school property. And then in the process, it sort of melts what happened was they were hanging up posters, and it started raining, and then some of the stuff from the posters started bleeding out onto the wall, and I guess that technically counts as vandalism. I don't know if it actually does in real life, but it's not real life, so you can kind of make stuff up. And so Greg is like in sort of hiding out because he's afraid that he's gonna get busted by the police or whatever. And then there was that other part at the very end where his family thought they had a power outage, but it turned out his little brother Manny figured out the circuit board and shut off everybody's room except for his own. And the whole family thought that like the street was like out of power and everything, which I thought that was a pretty funny plot twist. I thought that's what made this one a little bit better than the other three. So I would say overall this one was another just not great but good one. There's going to be some that are much better than this and worse than this. You'll see later on. So without further ado, let's get into that, I guess, because actually it starts now. The third wheel, in my opinion, was excellent. I thought how the entire Valentine's Day plot was handled very well, and the whole process Greg goes through of writing letters to a whole bunch of different people was interesting. It felt like something new and fresh, even though I guess it was explored a little bit in The Last Straw and maybe even in some of the other previous ones. But it felt very new, and there was a lot of interesting plot twists that I didn't expect. And one thing about this one is like a lot of things that in previous books were kind of recurring themes. I felt like in this book, they kind of got filtered out. Like, I feel like Greg getting in trouble with either his mom or his dad or both of them at the same time, well, for example, was kind of something that just kept cropping up somehow in the first 6 books. And then in this book, you finally get a break from like the same thing happening over and over again, to a certain extent. And instead you get like this section that hasn't really been explored before, or I shouldn't say hasn't been explored much before, and sort of becomes the front and center of the thing. There's also that whole thing of there was a virus in school, and Greg is trying to relive what it was like from before he was born, since he apparently remembers that, which, I mean, he's a fictional character. Jeff Kinney can make up whatever he wants about him. And yeah, overall, I thought that was interesting, to say the least. The next book in the series, Hard Luck, I thought was also very good, but not quite enough to make it to the S tier. I would say this one was still a little bit better than the last straw, but not quite on the third wheel level. So this one actually kind of picks up right off from the third wheel. What happens is there's this girl Abigail, and Raleigh and her end up together, even though Greg was the one that wanted to take her on a date. He invited Raleigh, they got interested in each other, and Raleigh once again splinters off from Greg, and they kind of drift apart for a while, and there's this whole big plot around it. I feel like even though that was definitely explored in The Ugly Truth and even a little bit in the first one, I feel like Hard Luck actually did this and did it like in the best way, because in the first book it was just kind of a subplot that lasted for a little while, and then in The Ugly Truth, even though yes it was a big thing, I don't know, I didn't like it. I just didn't like it as much, I guess. That's what it probably comes down to. But Hard Luck, there was a number of things. It also had a lot of really funny moments, kind of like The Last Straw and the third wheel did. Like, I guess what I consider the funny gags were way better than in these 3 than the 5 I put in the B tier so far. So for that reason, that's another sort of add-on to that book. And there's the whole component of Greg sort of goes through all these club meetings, and then there's the whole part with lunch tables, and he becomes friends with that guy Fregley that he really actually doesn't like, but he feels like he could sort of mold him into what he wants. I thought that whole thing with the belly button chewing was hilarious. That was something else, and I did not expect Fregley to become the most popular kid at school at the end. That was something really interesting. I feel like plot twists like that made this book one of my favorites, but it still doesn't have much on my absolute favorite in the series. Spoiler alert, I guess, for what I'm going to put down for the ones after this to some extent. The Long Haul, the book, not the movie. I actually didn't think the movie was that bad. I saw it once. It wasn't great, but it was not an S tier, that's for sure. But the book, The Long Haul, was, in my opinion, the best one. So this one sort of takes a break from everything that the series did up until that point. It's a total family road trip series. I don't even think Rowley is in this one at all. It's that hyper focused on family stuff. And Greg sort of or actually not Greg, the whole family goes on this trip. They find all sorts of crazy things. Greg runs into this family where the kids are jerks, and he constantly is having spats with them. They keep running into each other. The family goes to all these crappy motels, and specifically my favorite part in the entire book was when the dad had to do a work call, and then there's complete chaos in the car for a few minutes. I was rolling on the floor from that. I remember it vividly, and well, okay. I just got back. I had to get a drink of water because my throat hurt from talking so much. But like I was saying, The Long Haul, I thought that was the best book in the series. Just because it was filled to the brim with funny moments. And the whole plot was just complete chaos, but it did stay on track with something. There was also that thing with the pig, which I thought was pretty interesting. And so I don't know what else to say about this one other than that it was really, really funny, which in a book series like Diary of a Wimpy Kid is kind of what you should be going for. The next book is Old School, and this one, I guess this is technically a spoiler for what's coming up, but Old School I feel like was the last one of this sort of golden age between Third Wheel, Hard Luck, Long Haul, and then Old School. It was the last book that I felt was really good in the series. Before I kind of think Jeff Kinney's starting to run out of ideas, maybe, or it's also possible that the series has just kind of worn out on me. But Old School was still very good. I feel like it was a little bit weaker than The Hard Luck and The Last Straw, but still good enough to that I could say I solidly liked it more than all these other ones in B tier, Dog Days and all them. So Old School is the weakest of the very good tier, I would say. And what this one was about was how Greg is, he just likes to relax with all his gadgets and whatever. And then there's this whole program going around about, sort of unplugging from technology for a little while to, I guess, be a little bit more social, because how smartphones can be, with how people can be with their smartphones, I'm sure. So there's this whole route taken with the books, or not with this book, that that I felt like was kind of interesting, because it's like something that got explored a tiny bit in previous ones, and then in this one it kind of becomes a central point of the story. And the other thing about this one is there was a really, really funny part with toothpaste cap leading to a chain reaction of chaos. I don't know how to fully explain that one. Go read the book yourself if you're interested. But you know, it was a very creative entry. His grandfather also lives with Greg's grandfather also lives with them in this book for a little while. So that was something kind of interesting. And the one thing I didn't like about this book, though, was how at the very end, he finds out that the whole Silas Scratch stuff is fake, and he goes back home from that camp he decided to attend. But there were still some sort of unresolved things from the earlier parts of the book that we just never hear about again from after that book, or any of the ones after that, for that matter. But still very good. Moving along to where this is where things start to go downhill, at least in my opinion. Book 11 is Double Down. This is going to be the first one that I think was solidly below the average, in the C tier. And so what this one was about is how Greg is not very creative. He just likes to watch TV, play video games, all that kind of stuff. And his mom, and to a lesser extent his dad too, but mostly his mom, kind of try to get him to explore new things and do more using his mind instead of just, you know, mindlessly playing around with all the same stuff over and over again. And so there's this whole plot line of, here's the thing about it. Yes, there is a central plot, which I just mentioned, but that plot is kind of a mess. It takes these weird turns at certain points. Like at one point, he meets this kid named Maddox who isn't allowed by his parents, or at least his mom, to play TV or video games, and that sort of gives his mom an idea to sort of be more like that other kid. But that only lasts for a little while. There's also that other point where he plays the French horn for a little while. That seemed a little weird. And then there was also the very end, which I thought was pretty funny, where him and Rowley decide to start this online web movie series thing. And then Rowley somehow gets famous from it. That part was a little weird. Oh, by the way, in case you're wondering, Greg and Rowley do become friends again at the end of Hard Luck. Which is why, so if you thought they weren't friends anymore, then that clears up that confusion. But yeah, Double Down, it was okay still. It was decent, I would say, but not what the others were. It does not measure up to any of the other ones, in my opinion. The next book is The Getaway. So this one was even worse, in my opinion, and just on the basis that so much of it felt recycled from The Long Haul. The only real difference between that and this is that that was a family road trip where they went around to a bunch of places. This one was more of it was a plane trip. So the idea behind The Getaway is that it's Christmas time again, but the family decides they don't really want to, have Christmas in cold weather. So they go to, I think, Ecuador or somewhere in the tropics. I forgot where. And they sort of, and they have this fun little beach vacation where they do things they've never done before, and there's all these wild animals about everywhere, and it's a total new experience for them. But I remember the entire time I was reading this book, I just felt like this is ripped from The Long Haul, so much of it, at least. It did explore a little bit of new things, like there was that funny part where Greg tries to fight a spider, or they lose all their clothes for a little while, and some other weird stuff. But it just wasn't as funny. To me, it was just a less funny version of The Long Haul, so just to a large extent. So on that basis, I am going to put that in D. The next book in the series is The Meltdown, and this one, I'm gonna say this one is slightly below the original. So this one was, for a book that came in sort of the Double Down and After era, I thought it was pretty good. So what this one was about was Greg and Rowley are sort of trying to learn to be these tough survivors of the wild, more so because Greg's a wimpy kid, obviously, and Rowley pretty much is also a wimpy kid. And and so they sort of try to, I guess, beef up more. I know this type of thing was explored a little bit in some of the previous books, at least The Last Straw in particular. But here, it sort of takes a different approach on it, I guess. And one thing that was very boring about this book was it spent so much of the time just going over different neighbors that Greg has in his neighborhood. It did a little bit of that in previous books. And one thing I actually noticed is that there's sort of a continuity error with this book, where certain neighbors that got talked about in previous books, suddenly they just aren't there for whatever reason. Like they were talking about how this one guy replaced the family that moved out, and suddenly in the Meltdown, he's just not there anymore. It's like he disappeared or something. And then, so if it was just that alone, this would probably be a D tier also. But then at the very end, there's this giant snowball fight between one part of Greg Street and another part of Greg Street, and then another street gets involved, and then these kids that somehow live in the woods also get involved, and it's this whole brawl. That one part was really interesting to watch. It was like 40 pages of just one day, which if you know Wimpy Kid books, usually a sort of day in Greg's journal usually maybe lasts 2 pages at the most, maybe 3 or 4. But whatever the case, it was a really sort of epic read, and something I did not expect for a Wimpy Kid book. So it sort of went from very boring to very interesting at the tail end. And on that basis, I'm going to put that as a B tier. Not quite a high B tier, but it was still in like the average, I guess. And so, hello everybody. I'm back. I had to just take a break for a little while. It's actually been a few hours now. Just because my throat was so scratchy from doing all that talking. But anyway, let's finish these off. So I think the last thing I was saying was that The Meltdown, it was boring for most of the plot, and then it got interesting at the tail end. So between those two things put together, I felt that put it in the medium good tier. I guess the B tier is like not great, but good. At least that's how I'm judging it for this. So let's move on. The next one is Wrecking Ball. This one, out of all the ones that have come out since, didn't mean to do that. Since the Double Down and After era, I think this one was probably the best one overall. This one was interesting. It was about Greg's family was decided to renovate their home, and they did all these interesting things with it. They came up with all these ideas. What started it was Greg's great aunt passed away, and they got a chunk of the inheritance money, and they decided to spend it on home renovations, and they had a whole bunch of disasters with it. I felt like that one was kind of an interesting and fresh idea because, you know, I feel like starting with old school in particular, even arguably a little bit before that, is when like certain things that might have been like more minor topics beforehand, or in the case of Wrecking Ball, not at all, sort of got brought to the forefront more instead of just being some minor background subject that only gets like 3 pages. I feel like in a lot of cases they didn't do the best job with that, but in Wrecking Ball's case, I think they did a pretty good job. I think it's not quite good enough to where I would put it on par with old school and all these ones, but it was still pretty solid. Unfortunately, the next book I cannot say the same for at all. This is The Deep End. This, in my opinion, was the worst one. Just like The Getaway, it was a total ripoff of The Long Haul, except in this one, at least with The Getaway, it was like kind of still somewhat interesting because they at least did a different type of trip, I guess you could say. With this, you can't really say that at all. It was another road trip. It did pick up right where they left off from Wrecking Ball. Or not right where they left off, but a little while after that, where the family stayed at Greg's grandmother's house at first, but then they decided they wanted to get out of there as soon as possible, and they moved, or they didn't move. But they decided to take a road trip for a while, and this one was incredibly unmemorable. I'm trying to remember a detail from this. I think Greg and this group of kids, they had some kind of argument. Like any other book, it did have its funny moments, and as a book overall, I guess it was okay. But in terms of being a wimpy kid book, it was not it was not up to speed. Especially when you think about the fact that there was at least one other book that basically did the same thing and much better. On to the next one this is Big Shot. So the plot of this one is, so as explored a little bit in some of the earlier books, Greg is not an athlete, but his mom thinks that he should try to at least give it one more shot. So after a little while, Greg decides to take up basketball, and he ends up on this horrible team, which does not amount to anything. It loses every single game, and eventually there's this last place bracket thing that they get signed up for, and Greg's team, Greg takes this weird shot at the very end of the last game, and he saves his team. It was weird. I don't know how to explain it exactly. Like he got switched to the other team, but then he scored in the wrong basket, and it helped his original team, and they won. If you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. If not, go read the book, I guess, if you didn't understand that. But overall, this one was a tiny bit better than Double Down, but at the same time, the plot was very boring. This plot was incredibly repetitive. There were so many things about they might win this game, but then they didn't. Surprise, surprise. And all in all, it just was not a memorable book. I guess unless you've always wanted to see Greg, a full compilation of Greg sucking at sports, then this is the book for you. But if not, then it just wasn't anything too special. Like any other book, it did have its funny moments and stuff, but I don't know. Anyway, on to the very last one. This is Diaper Overload, and this one was pretty interesting. It wasn't. It was another, I would say, medium one. I would say the books are showing signs of starting to get better again. I don't know if they can ever fully replicate the whole golden age that I talked about a little bit earlier. But I'm gonna say it's slightly above the first book. The plot of this one is Greg decides to sort of get involved in Roderick's band and help them out a little bit. And there's all this drama with Roderick's band's lead singer, Bill. They even go at one point to try and meet Roderick's idol, this sort of deadbeat, I guess, musician who hasn't been in public in a long time. I think he got scared of the paparazzi. I'd have to read the book again, and it's not here right now. But yeah, overall, this one was pretty good. I definitely thought that because this one kind of recycled a topic that's been sort of minor in various other books, especially in Roderick Rules. There was a part where Greg, quote unquote, takes up drumming lessons from Roderick, but Roderick is the worst teacher ever. But this book did a decent job, I would say, with sort of fleshing out that whole side of the series. Or I guess corner, because how many sides can there be? And yeah, that's all I could really say about this one. The last few books, one thing I will say is that they sort of just hyper focus on one specific thing, and like nothing else exists. Like how I said with the very first book, it was all over the place. And then there isn't a perfect trend, but I would say a general trend of becoming more and more niche, I guess, as time goes on. And in some cases that works pretty good, like with Wrecking Ball and Diaper Overload, it did. And then like with the Deep End, I said that that did a horrible job. And then with like Big Shot and Double Down, it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't super. I didn't think Jeff Kinney did a super good job with it either. And yeah, that's that's I guess my whole opinion on the various Diary of a Wimpy Kid books. I spent a lot of time discussing the whole, I guess, trajectory that the series as a whole has gone on. Maybe I could get around to reading No Brainer someday. I've been busy with a lot of things. That's why I haven't been uploading much videos, and if you guys did or didn't notice. I'm hoping to do some more. I do want to keep this channel running. I do really enjoy it. Maybe I could do more of my whole Mr. Incredible series. I'll definitely do some more of those for sure. I don't know exactly when, but at some point before I'm dead. And I am getting into doing this tier list stuff too. I don't want it to just be about the Mr. Incredible stuff. I do want to branch out a little bit and do some other things. And I guess that's it. Have a nice day, y'all.